6. Phone passcode 423-45198. Item number 1, OR 2021-0029. Ordinance amendment to appropriating ordinance number 1, authorizing the reclassification of the positions of processing clerk, number 760, and processing clerk bilingual, number 790, to assistant registrar in the health department, vital statistics office. Item 2, LM 2021-0399. Resolution to the Board of Alders requesting the use of American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, funding for quality of life supplemental details, lateral bonuses, and IT infrastructure in an estimated amount of $12 million and 0 cents from the ARPA direct allocation and/or county allocation, or a combination of funding. Item 3, OR 2021-0028. Ordinance amendment to appropriating ordinance number 1, authorizing the creation of positions within the Finance Department, Information and Technology Division, and budget transfer number 137-22-1, transferring funds from the expenditure reserve account to the Finance Department, Information and Technology salary account in the amount of $155,000 and 0 cents. Item number 4, OR 2021-0027. Ordinance amendment pursuant to Article 8 of the Charter and Section 2-190 of the Code of General Ordinances, eliminating negative line item balances for the fiscal year ending 6/30/21. These items are filed with the city clerk and may be inspected in room 202, 200 Orange Street, New Haven. Per order, the Honorable Yvette Hamilton, Chair, attest Michael Smart, City Clerk. If you need a disability-related accommodation, please call 3 business days in advance at 946-7651 voice or 946-8582 TTY. The public may join the meeting and may send public comment to publictestimony@newhavenct.gov. The meeting may be viewed at https://bit.ly/3 B R W H 8, or by phone at area code 301-715-8592 or area code 312-626-6799. Meeting webinar ID 936-9650-5056. Phone passcode 423-45193. Note, since the meeting is remote, participation by a quorum of members is expressly prohibited at the physical location and will not be present. However, any member of the public may request in writing a physical location and any electronic equipment necessary to attend the meeting in real time no later than 24 hours prior to the meeting. Said individual shall have the same opportunities to provide comment or otherwise participate in the meeting as would be afforded if the meeting was held in person, with the following exception. Under law, if such person loses the ability to participate because of an interruption, failure, or degradation of such person's connection to the meeting by electronic equipment, the committee is not required to adjourn or postpone the meeting. Thank you, everybody. We will move now to introductions of the committee. I will read through the roll. As I have already mentioned, Alder Hamilton is not able to be here this evening. Alder Marchand, I am here. Alder Santiago. Alder DeCola.
Alder Sal DeCola, Ward 18.
Alder Morrison. Alder Walker Myers. Alder Festa.
Anna Festa, Ward 10.
Alder Furlow.
Richard Furlow, Ward 27.
Alder Rodriguez.
Alder Evelyn Rodriguez, Ward 4.
Alder Hurt.
Alder Ron Hurt, Ward 3.
Alder Decker.
Charles Decker, Ward 9.
Thank you, colleagues. I would like also to acknowledge Alder Abby Roth, and Alder Eli Saban, who are also here. We thank them for their attendance. I'm going to check the attendees to see if we have other alders or elected officials. I see Alder Steve Winter in the attendees list as well. Welcome to him. We will proceed this evening as we have over the past 18 plus months during the pandemic. We will go through the agenda in order. My intention is to proceed in order that we read the agenda, which starts with those two positions in vital statistics. And then we'll move on to the ARPA funding and the transfers, the staffing transfers related to the ARPA funding, and then we'll conclude with item 4. So I think at this point, we will do item 1 and then offer the public a chance to comment, then items 2 and 3 and offer the public a chance to comment, and then item 4 and offer the public a chance to comment. When we hear the presentations from staff, we will then give members of the committee an opportunity to ask questions. I would ask committee members, please, to keep yourselves to 4 questions each. I'll read through the roster as we have been doing. This time we will start with Alder Santiago. Since I'm chairing the meeting, we'll start with the person who follows me on the list as it's published on the city's website. And then when we're done with committee questions, we'll proceed with the public comment on each item. So why don't we begin with item number 1? I'm certain that our city staff are ready to promote the appropriate members of the administration who are going to present this item. I see city staff joining us now, and I thank them for being here. Before we listen to them, let me just remind colleagues that our protocol has been that members of the committee are on camera, unless of course you need to excuse yourself momentarily, and that colleagues who are here with us who are not on the committee typically remain off camera, and that's the way we're doing it so far for the most part. And I thank my colleagues for doing that. Mr. Gormany, do you want to introduce your team who's going to present, and then we'll have their names and addresses for the record.
Absolutely, Alder Marchand. Good evening, everyone. Michael Gormany, 45 Jefferson Road, Branford, Connecticut, City Acting Controller. And to help present this item is Brooke Logan. So I'll ask name and address.
Yep. Brooke Logan, 96 Village Lane, Branford, Connecticut.
We have the Registrar of Vital Statistics, Patricia Clark.
Good evening, Patricia Clark, and my address is 47 Stuyvesant Avenue, New Haven, Connecticut.
And Mr. Steve Labrandy, our Human Resources and Benefits Manager.
Steve Labrandy, 470 Lakeview Drive, Fairfield, Connecticut.
All right, thank you, Alders and city staff. I will start off the presentation and then hand it over to Brooke and Patricia to finish up the presentation. So what you have before you is an ordinance amendment to change 2 vacant positions located within our Health Department Vital Stats Division. As the notice mentioned, position number 760, a processing clerk, and position 790 of processing clerk bilingual. Those are 2 vacant positions due to a retirement and a resignation within the Vital Stats office. What we are asking is to change the titles of the position to assistant registrar for more operational efficiencies within the Vital Stats office. Again, this is per the city charter and general code of ordinance that we must have any title changes approved by this board, by the Board of Alders and the Finance Committee. Now, we are not asking for a budget transfer in this case. We are only asking for title changes. We are not asking for a budget transfer because we are planning on hiring the positions within the allocated budget of those two positions. The allocated budget for both positions is $91,164. Again, we are not planning to hire above that amount, and we do have lapsed salary also in case there are any extenuating circumstances that require above that amount. But again, right now we are not planning to hire above that amount of those two positions combined. So with that said, I will turn it over to Patricia and Brooke to talk a little bit about why those changes are needed within the office.
Thank you. I think Brooke has asked me to speak for the health department. So again, good evening. Thank you, Vice Chair, for speaking with us tonight, and all the alders. I appreciate your time and commitment to seeing us tonight. Mr. Gormany outlined it very well. We are asking for the title change to be Assistant Registrar. In doing so, that will help this office run more efficiently. We are the highest foot traffic office in all of City Hall, and with a full staff, we only have 4. The last 2 months, we've only had 2 people working. So this does tend to get backups on our lines, so to speak. So we would like to relieve that, and one way of doing so by this title change would be that as an assistant registrar, these positions would also be able to sign off on marriage licenses. Right now, the registrar, myself, is the only one who is able to do that. So that means if I step out of the office for a meeting because I happen to be sick for anything, no marriage licenses can be issued to anyone in the city of New Haven. We would like to have, but by changing the title Assistant Registrar, then more people in the office would be able to sign off on those certifications, which would speed up the process quite a bit in our office. And then it also means that it's not dependent on just one person at all times to be here. I think Mike, covered the financial side of this, that it would be the same as what's already in the budget. This title change has already been approved by Local 884. So it does have their blessing as well. Brooke, is there anything else that we wanted to add? I know we had some notes, but I think Michael covered a lot of it as well.
Yep, the two of you covered all of our main points.
So we're happy to discuss any questions or answers if you need it as well.
Yeah, as Brooke mentioned, as Patricia mentioned, the one thing I did forget to mention is, again, these are still within the same union. As Patricia mentioned, we did work with the union on the actual title change. These positions, again, are needed for the operational efficiencies that Patricia outlined. And with the board, with this committee and the Board of Alder approval, we can begin the posting process to get some staff within the Vital Stats office. So again, we'll be happy to answer any questions from the committee members.
Thank you, Mr. Gormany. Thank you, Ms. Logan and Ms. Clark, for your concise presentations. We will now proceed with questions from members of the committee, starting with seeing who's here, starting with Alder DeCola. Alder DeCola, you are currently muted, although we can tell you're speaking. All right, we'll move on to looking again at who's here. Alder Festa.
Thank you, Vice Chair Marchand. I do have a couple of questions for our departments. You mentioned it's a high traffic area. More people will be able to sign off. I guess what I'm concerned with is the processing clerk. Their salary is the same salary that this individual will now have the assistant registrar. Are the responsibilities of the job description similar?
The job description is very similar. It is practically 100% similar. The only additional task is that they will also be able to sign off on marriage certificates.
Okay, so that salary merits the assistant registrar.
Yes,
And is there testing involved for this position?
it will be a civil service tested position through human resources.
Okay, and is that costing us anything, or is this in addition to other civil service testing that will be
No.
happening?
Nope, this goes through the regular civil service process that we normally have, and I think I mentioned prior that really the test that costs us money is public safety. Normal other jobs like these are really worked through HR and the department. So it's really the staff time in creating the test and administering the test through HR is the process.
Okay, so nothing really new there. And as far as the processing clerk position, do we need this position at all?
Do we need a processing clerk?
Correct, like this is a name change, but how is that? Is the processing clerk position going to be affected by this? And is it a position that is necessary or needed by the department?
The assistant registrar position will replace that. And again, it's the same job description, but with this title, they will be more useful for the entire office.
Okay, so the job description is as it exists, just for clarification purposes. The only thing that changes is the title from processing clerk to assistant registrar. That is it, but it's the same position. Is that right?
That is correct, Alder Costa.
Correct. This job will be performing the duties of the processing clerk and have the signatory authority of an assistant registrar.
Got it. Thank you for that clarification. I appreciate it. No further questions.
Thank you, Alder Festa. And before we continue, I would like to acknowledge Alder Jeanette Morrison, who has joined us. And next, we'll move on to Alder Furlow.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Just trying to find my unmute button before I started speaking. Good evening. Thank you for joining. I think the only question that I have, and I think we should just maybe say it just to have it in committee on our record. So the assistant registrar, where, and maybe Mr. Gormley could better explain this, but where is this in this name change? How is this applicable through our charter?
So the General Code of Ordinance, which is governed by the charter, has a section, and I can get the exact section for you. Just give me 1 second. But there's a section in there that governs transfers and reclassification of positions. So that particular section in the Code of Ordinance says anytime the city is reclassifying an existing position that was approved in the budget, we need to get the Board of Alders approval to do so. And that is Article 8 and Section 2-386 of the Code of Ordinance.
Yeah, more specifically, that wasn't, and thank you, Mr. Gormley, I appreciate that. I'm speaking more along the lines of adding an assistant registrar.
So, so your question is, what is the authority to change the title?
Well, what is the authority of our city to add an assistant registrar that would have the ability to make these, to sign on these documents? I think my only concern with this is that these documents are extremely important. Marriage certificates and the like are extremely important. So is there anything that stipulates that an assistant registrar, as authorized by the state of Connecticut, would have the ability to
I got
sign
it.
off on these documents.
Okay, that's kind of where I thought you were going. So I
Yeah,
think
I'm sorry. I was maybe
Patricia
a little
or
confusing.
no,
Yeah.
no problem. I think Patricia or Brooke can probably better answer as far as is there any state requirement or anything like that regarding an assistant registrar.
Trish, did you want to answer or did you want me? Okay.
Well, the only people, my understanding is for the state requirements, the only positions that can sign off on that are someone with the position title registrar or assistant registrar. So in us adding that position, we are only helping this office to run more efficiently. But that is something that as, you know, right now, the only other positions in the department are processing clerks. They cannot sign off on these documents. And that has been the detriment to the department. I don't know if Brooke, if you want to add more to that or not.
Yeah, I was just going to say that per state statute that it is the assistant registrar or the registrar who have the ability to sign the specific paperwork.
So I think through the vice chair in this meeting, Brooke or Trish, I think it would be helpful for Alder Furlow if we just get them that state statute. And but I believe that answers your question, Alder Furlow, on it's really recommended by state statute and just for operational efficiencies within vital stats.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Gormady. And I think that information should come through this committee. So, Mr. Vice Chair, at your pleasure,
So
please.
noted.
And that's really all that I have. Thank you again, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Alder Furlow. We'll now move to Alder Rodriguez.
Thank you, Vice Chair Marchand. I have a few questions. The first question that I have is, why haven't the positions been filled and have been remained vacant? And the second question that I have is that as processing clerk, you have a bilingual position. Will the assistant registrar will one of them be stipulated for a bilingual individual? What is going to happen to that skill that's so significant in the position you have for processing clerk? Thank you.
Alder Rodriguez, we have not been able to post a position because we have been trying to get the title change approved. So that has been why we have been without, and we are looking to get your approval. We are planning on posting the position for both as bilingual preferred. Ideally, both positions would turn into bilingual if we could be so lucky and so fortunate. To address us not currently having a bilingual staff member here, we do have, I have at the ready a phone call to other people in City Hall that come down frequently to help with people if there is a language barrier. And all of our forms that are on the website and here are bilingual. They are one side English and one side Spanish. I hope that answers your question.
Okay. Thank you. And in reference to follow-up question, how long has the position been vacant? Thank you.
I believe, I have to look at the calendar. We had one retirement
In August.
in August. I was going to say towards the end of August. And then the resignation came, I would say about 4 weeks ago, 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair Marchand. That is it.
Thank you, Alder Rodriguez. Alder Hurt, any questions for these folks?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I have no questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Alder Decker.
Thank you, Alder. I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Decker. I want to give an opportunity for Alder DeCola. If you have any questions.
No, at this time, thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Chair.
sir. And Alder Morrison, any questions of these folks about this item?
No questions at this time, Mr. Vice Chair. Thank you.
All right. So now we will see if any members of the public wish to testify on this item. The title changes in the Department of Vital Statistics. We would invite members of the public who wish to testify to raise their hand using the raise hand function in the Zoom. You may also email public testimony at newhavenct.gov and say you wish to testify. Push *6 if you're on a phone. Put a note in the Q&A saying you would like to testify. There are multiple ways to indicate that you wish to testify. Mr. Lucas, I am not seeing anybody.
Affirmative.
A second call for public testimony on this item. And a third opportunity. Seeing none, let's move on to the next two items, which are related. We're going to discuss items 2 and 3 together, since they are very much related to each other. And Mr. Gormany, are you once again the quarterback for this presentation?
As always, Vice Chair Marchand, I am with you guys through the whole meeting.
Well, we're delighted, sir, to have you. I assume there are more people who need to be added to the list.
Yes, sir. I'm looking at the attendee list right now. I see Mr. Lucas bringing most everyone in.
So, Mr. Gormany, I think it would be helpful if you do what you did in the last item, which is to introduce yourself, name and address, and then prompt each member of the team to introduce him or herself so that we can just get right through those introductions.
Absolutely. Mr. Lucas, if you can also promote Captain John Healy and Alyssa Epson from the New Haven PD. So starting with myself, Michael Gormany, Acting City Controller, 45 Jefferson Road, and I'm just going to go in order on my screen. We have Chief Renee Dominguez.
Good evening. Interim Chief Renee Dominguez, 1 Union Avenue, New Haven, Connecticut.
Our City Engineer.
Good evening, everyone. Giovanni Zinn, City Engineer, 95 Soundview Terrace here in New Haven.
Our City IT Director.
Hello, Ted Zwicky, IT Director, 53 Richmond Avenue, West Haven, Connecticut.
Our Assistant Chief.
Good evening, Carl Jacobson, 1 Union Avenue, New Haven, Connecticut.
Our Deputy CAO.
Rebecca Bombero, 122 West Rock Avenue, New Haven, Connecticut.
New Haven PD Captain.
You're muted.
Captain John Healy, and I'm with Detective Elizabeth White, 1 Union Avenue, New Haven PD.
Thank you. And our Supervisor of Management Services for NHPD.
Alyssa Epson, 476 Barberry Road, East Haven, Connecticut.
And I believe I caught everyone that will be presenting on this item. So I am not sure, but we do have a PowerPoint. I'm just not sure who needs share screen on the PowerPoint. Is that you, Chief, or Alyssa?
Oh, okay. I thought you were, but I can pull it up very quickly. And if you want to give me share screen. Sorry. I don't have it yet.
Mr. Lucas, can you allow our interim chief of police to share screen, please?
Just give me one second. I'm frozen. Hold on. You should be all set now, Chief.
We thank everyone for their patience as we navigate the technology. We can now see your screen, Chief Dominguez.
All right, so thank you, committee members, and thank you, Alders, for hearing this presentation. We are going to go through the submission of the ARPA fund allocation proposal, the most recent proposal, which really deals with IT infrastructure related to public safety, personnel with bonus related to police laterals, and quality of life overtime allocation. So we will go through those items as well as item number 3 on the agenda, which adds 2 positions to our city IT staff to deal with networking and IT infrastructure, which is primarily related to this item as well. So moving on to the first slide, Chief. So the New Haven ARPA allocation, American Rescue Plan Act allocation, we received a total of $115 million, which was a direct allocation of $90 million and $25 million in what is known as county funding, which is funding from the federal government based on county. So each town in New Haven County received a portion of that funding as well. Through this entire process, there have been various approvals by the Finance Committee and the entire Board of Alders, which really started in the summer. As you can see on the screen, it was $20 million of revenue replacement, administration, and COVID. The recently approved Community Resiliency Department, which has $8 million of an ARPA allocation, $6.3 million for summer reset, and $4 million for police and fire overtime, which was approved as part of the fiscal year 21-22 budget. So as part of this request, what the city is looking at is possibly reallocating some of the funds that were previously approved through the Board of Alders and reallocate it to the particular projects that you will hear about in the upcoming slides. So to give you a sense, the Board of Alders approved, as I mentioned in the bullet point above, $20 million, which really dealt with revenue replacement, administration, and COVID expenditures. In fiscal year 2021, we used about only $1 million of that $20 million allocation, which leaves approximately a balance of $19 million. And the next sub-bullet points kind of break down what we're looking at, that $19 million remaining balance. $12 million for the camera project, $6 million for any fiscal year 22 revenue replacement or COVID-related expenditures, and $1 million for admin. The $1 million for admin, of course, was the positions to help administer and fund the American Rescue Plan that we discussed months ago when the board approved the overall $26.3 million package. So this is a general breakdown of the American Rescue Plan. The city is currently working on the actual remaining balance of the American Rescue Plan to submit an overall plan of the remaining balance, in which this funding would be included in that remaining balance if approved by this committee. But again, we are working on a plan to submit to the Board of Alders for the remaining balance of the American Rescue Plan. So the next few slides, we're really going to talk about what that $12 million is made up of. We have our IT director, Chet, and Giovanni, who will talk about the next two slides, which really break down some of the smaller projects listed within that $12 million. So I will turn it over to our IT director, Chet Sawicki, and our city engineer, Giovanni Zinn, to sort of talk a little bit about each of these projects.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for taking the time out to allow us to present our request for the ARPA funding for the IT side. First on the list are the firewall upgrades. Hopefully everyone can hear me. I want to start with firewall upgrades first. We had asked for $350,000 on that. We have 2 data centers currently today. We have one at our Hall of Records building, which is our main data center for the city, and we have one at 1 Union Avenue Police Headquarters, which is our kind of backup or our public safety data center. There are firewalls in each one of those locations. The way that we run our firewalls today is we run pairs of firewalls. So we run them in a redundant mode. So if one firewall were to fail, we have another firewall that is running in place. So we have 2 firewalls currently at our Hall of Records data center, and we have 2 firewalls currently at our police 1 Union Avenue data center. For those of you who do not know, a firewall is a network security device that monitors incoming and outgoing network traffic, and it permits or it blocks data packets, basically. So it's analyzing everything that's coming through based on a certain set of security roles that we set up as a city. It establishes a barrier between our internal network within the city and incoming traffic from external sources such as the internet in order to block malicious traffic like viruses and hackers and things like that. Our last firewall upgrade were several years ago. We are good where we still apply firmware updates on a regular basis as they're available from our vendor. So our firewalls are current in that aspect, but the hardware, the technology that they're running on is a little bit outdated. It is still supported by our vendor, but it is approaching the end of life. So what we'd like to do is update our firewalls to newer models. Updating this critical device devices, those will ensure that we are staying current in one of our cyber security most valuable assets, as well as allowing us to be more flexible and efficient for our workforce while continuing to increase security and redundancy. It'll also allow us to increase our VPN throughput and our overall speed from 1 gig to 10 gigabits per second. So that's my overview of the firewall upgrades, a little bit about that and what we're asking for. I'd like to, Giovanni, do you have anything to add in reference to the firewall upgrades?
No. I think you covered that well.
All right, I'm gonna move right on to the next one on the list, the data center, the $400,000 one for the PD. This kind of goes together with the data center 200 Wintergreen for $450,000, but I'll start with the police department overview. As I had mentioned when I was speaking about the firewalls, we have 2 main data centers in the city. We have our main data center at the Hall of Records building, and then our backup or our public safety data center at 1 Union Avenue. Our data center at the police department is currently plagued by overheating and insufficient power issues that occur from time to time. The data center itself physically is a triangle-shaped room, which does not provide adequate space to properly lay out the racks and provide proper air circulation for the equipment that it really should have. We have a UPS, which is a uninterrupted power supply system, basically a battery backup, if you will, which is an older model, and it's not really, that is also reaching its end of life, and that cannot be expanded anymore. We are running out of power on that battery backup. Due to the tight space and it's the awkward space that it's shaped today, data center and racks are overcrowded, and current HVAC units are not adequate to provide proper air circulation to allow the cool equipment to stay cool. There's one main HVAC unit, and then there's also a wall-mounted backup unit that exists in that data center. from time to time, we have had issues with one or both of those devices failing. Those devices are not adequate to sustain the cooling requirements for that room by themselves, meaning that if one of those, both of those units need to be running at all times. If one of those units fails, we start running into an issue where the heat starts creeping up on those servers. When that happens, and it has happened, that results in us having to open up the doors, bringing fans, shut down the servers if it tends to get hot. So we've been kind of watching that. These funds will be used to expand the size of the PD data center, making that room a rectangular shape. So we're going to knock down a couple of walls that exist in that area to make the room a rectangular shape. That'll allow us to properly lay out the racks. It will also allow us to upgrade our UPS, our battery backup system, install new HVAC units, the ones that are actually in line with our racks, which will allow us to create a hot and a cold aisle to better control all the environmentals in that area. And that would be similar to what we have over at our main data center over at the Hall of Records. So basically, we're trying to mimic that data center. I want to kind of bounce quickly over to the data center over at Wintergreen. That's $450,000. We were asking for that one. The Wintergreen Avenue building has a dedicated space that we have selected for the data center there. We don't currently have a data center at Wintergreen Avenue. That building, as you may know, is getting used more and more frequently now, and we are trying to build out another data center there. These funds will be used to help build a third data center in the city. So we'll still keep our main data center over Hall of Records. We'll have our public safety data center, and we're going to be adding a third data center that would be over at Wintergreen Avenue. And that will allow us to replicate data between the three data centers, expand our technology infrastructure for the PD Training Academy, and also that section of the city, bring some technology infrastructure to that, to that section of the city. So the funds for that will help us purchase and lay out network racks, procure and install a UPS, procure and install new inline HVAC units, and enable a hot and a cold aisle to better control the environmentals. And just a quick little blurb again about the data centers as they exist, and it doesn't really pertain to what we're asking today, but just a little more informational for you. We have it set up in a way, like I said, we have everything kind of failing over to each other. So we have everything at Hall of Records that can set up from a backup standpoint, sends it over to the police department. Anything at the police, public safety, fails over to the city side as well. We have that for our internet connections and for our critical systems where the data is being backed up on both locations. So introducing a third data center, Wintergreen Avenue, will allow us the ability to replicate and store data to a third data center that we don't have today. The reason for that, obviously, with everything that's going on in the news, with all the cyber attacks and incidents that occur, this is just another step to help protect the city in the event that we were to fall victim of any kind of ransomware or malware or virus attempt or hacking attempt. So that's kind of what I had in reference to the data centers for both police department and Wintergreen for the overview. I don't know if Giovanni has anything additional to add.
No, I think you covered it pretty well. I would just note again that, from a facilities point of view, we'll be working closely with IT to build out these two data centers. We're kind of looking at $850,000 in aggregate between the two. As we finish design, the exact allocation between the two may vary a little bit, but we are pretty confident that we're very confident that I think we'll be able to cover that in the $850 in aggregate. I would also point out that the nice thing about having 200 Wintergreen is that it's geographically separate from the other two data centers that we do have, so that if there are any events that cause a widespread outage or connection problems or what have you in the downtown area, we do have something that is significantly removed from the other two data centers and for additional redundancy.
Thank you. I'll move on to the next request item was Axonius Cyber Security. We are requesting $150,000 for that software product. So this is cybersecurity asset management software. And basically what this will do is this is going to provide the city with a comprehensive asset solution that will cover inventory, locate coverage gaps, and automate security policy against the ever-changing cyber threats that we face on a regular basis. We have attempted hacks, viruses, malicious nature every day within the city. We have hundreds of thousands actually each day against the city of New Haven. Now, while we can't be 100% positive that we will never be compromised, we have to take certain steps to make sure that we have things in place to help us prevent such incidents. So, like I mentioned, this is a cyber asset inventory. So it's always going to be up-to-date inventory of all of our assets. It allows us to automate and decide what customized actions to trigger anytime that a certain incident were to occur. And basically, this is another tool that we are looking to add to our cyber security arsenal to help identify and prevent any malicious activity from gaining control of our infrastructure, and try to keep things secure in that aspect. Next one I'm going to kind of bounce over to is the Comstat Room. That is $100,000 that we are asking for that one. Many of you, I think, are already probably aware of the incidents with the audiovisual equipment in the Comstat Room. That room has had some issues over the past few years where the equipment has started failing. We have tried to piecemeal it together and patch it together to try to keep it operational and functioning for the events that were happening on site pre-COVID. And then obviously once COVID hit, now we are trying to do combination. There are some on-site meetings that take place in that room. And then there are some virtual rooms, and that room really wasn't designed for virtual. So we are looking to spend this $100,000 to upgrade all the audio-visual equipment in that room. We have reached out to a vendor, HB Communications, and we have started some conversations with them about what it would take to upgrade that room to bring us current with operational equipment for that room. And I don't know, Giovanni, do you have anything to add for that Comstat Room or anything?
No.
No, okay. All right, next one I'm going to roll over to is the city facilities, the Wi-Fi expansion. We are asking for $300,000 of the ARPA funds that we could allocate toward that goal. As a result of COVID, many departments have moved to the use of mobile devices versus standalone computers. Pre-COVID, everybody had a standalone PC on their desk, and there really wasn't a lot of mobile devices in the city. So there really wasn't the need for a lot of Wi-Fi access per se. Having Wi-Fi more readily available in certain areas today will enhance mobility options, along with data and system access for all employees by having the existing Wi-Fi SSIDs available at any of the city's operating locations for the city issued mobile phones and or laptop devices. So again, this is more for city devices. On our SSIDs, which are basically when you search for your Wi-Fi networks, you'll see a number of SSIDs. We standardize on those. So those would be the same across the board, whether I'm at Hall of Records building, whether I'm at police department, DPW, Parks Department, so on and so forth. And the goal of that is that if I have a city device, I could connect to the internal city network wherever I am on this Wi-Fi connection, and I will have access to all of my data, right? So whether I'm looking for data on the network drives, if I'm looking for something cloud-based in my OneNote or a SharePoint, or if I need to use Teams or any other application on my device, on my mobile device. We could also run internal applications. So anything that is on our devices today, any kind of software applications that we want to run, we'll be able to use those when we are away from our desk. So all applications are basically migrating to the cloud. A lot of them are vendor-based. So we are certainly doing the same thing internally from a city side. We are looking to upgrade and move a lot of things to the cloud wherever possible. And since we are moving things to the cloud, it's kind of necessary now for people to be able to go to certain locations in the buildings and be able to connect in with these wireless devices. So we're going to start with the conference rooms. and then kind of move out from there. So we're not going to take an approach of blanketing one whole building. We are going to start with kind of the conference rooms and the meeting rooms and areas like that that don't have Wi-Fi today, that we know have mobile devices and that need that infrastructure in place. Next one I'm going to kind of move on to is the MCTs and associated equipment for the mobile units. So MCTs are mobile computer terminals. Those are the computers that sit in any of the public safety apparatuses. So it could be a fire truck, it could be a police cruiser, could be a command vehicle, anything like that. We have not done an upgrade on these MCTs in probably about 5 or 6 years. Currently today, the police department is running their MCTs on Fujitsu tablets. Those are no longer being manufactured. They stopped manufacturing those probably about 2 years ago. They still support the device, but it's very difficult for them to get parts for those Fujitsu tablets that are in these vehicles, in the police vehicles. So we have been trying to piece the ones that break, try to piece them together with other components that we have. The fire department used to have Fujitsu tablets as well. They have migrated over to Toughbooks because Fujitsu isn't making these products anymore. So we have an inventory of some parts from the fire department that we've been using to kind of keep the police department ones up and running. What we are asking for is the money that's required to replace all of the outdated equipment for these mobile computer terminals and get them current on Panasonic Toughbooks for the police department. There is another project that's further on the list, which we're going to talk about soon, and that is our CAD RMS system that will be coming in a conversation in a couple of minutes. So I don't want to lead into that too much, but these devices will be essential to be able to utilize that new system when we get to that. These are basically going to be for anybody who has a Fujitsu tablet today. We are going to replace that with one of these vehicles. It's a replacement of the actual tablet itself, of the laptop. It also is a replacement of the dock that goes in the vehicle and the infrastructure that supports that device. So that's what that $750,000 is asking for that. That'll help us transition to the newer devices during that time frame. And I think that is all I had. Now, just kind of bouncing over to the new CAD RMS system.
Can I just interrupt for one moment? This is Alder Adam Marchand, Vice Chair of the committee. I am grateful, Director Sawicki, for the very thorough and granular explanation that you're giving. But I'm also conscious of the time. And so would ask you to flow it a little bit faster if you could, or tighten it up just a bit in the interest of time. Thank you so much, sir.
All right, the CAD and the RMS system, that is our computer aided dispatch and our record management system. That is a system that is running at the police department today. That system has been, or the vendor, I'm sorry, the vendor for that system has been acquired numerous times. So during the acquisitions, they have lost their personnel that knows the product and is able to support the product. So today, currently, we are running in our main CAD RMS system for the police department with a software that is actually outdated, and we can't really get support from the vendor. So whenever we have issues from the vendor, we contact their help desk, and it takes them a while to figure out how to resolve those issues because they're not really familiar with that product today that they have. They do have a newer model that they are looking to push some of the people to, but some of their customers, and that's where their focus is internally. But even that product is not really in their goal kind of going forward as to what they want to keep and support. So we did work with the police department and purchasing department to gather a list of requirements and to put those together and go out for an RFP, which has been completed. And that RFP will basically allow us to have a new CAD RMS system. It'll cover the migration of all the data that we have today in our existing systems over to the new system. It will cover training for the on the software for people, and it will also allow obviously better access to the data that we don't have today from internally to the police based on some of the issues that we're having with the current vendor. And it will also allow more public facing citizen engaged activities, I guess, where they can go through and they could look up things on their own possibly, or gather some information if they need to. And I don't know if Chief,
All right.
yes, anything to add in reference to the CAD RMS system, or Alyssa or anybody else?
I think that was a thorough presentation. I think, as Vice Chair Marchand mentioned, in the interest of time, we're going to get to the bulk, or we have one more item to the next slide, Chief, which is the supplemental overtime. I'm not sure, Chief, if you're going to speak to this, or Becky.
I can speak quickly to it, and Becky can add anything if she wants that I missed. So this is we're asking for just some supplemental overtime for quality of life type activities that the police department does. And this number is per year. And it's to supplement neighborhood walking beats, bike patrols, enhance any special details, quality of life concerns. We see this with our ATVs, with our illegal drag racing, but also spills over into noise. And it allows us to do some undercover work, some crime prevention, to kind of do larger investigations if needed, if we see a spike and we're able to address crime through these types of supplemental. So it's for patrol and also for the Detective Bureau that would be able to utilize these funds.
And just to clarify, this total would cover the rest, the next 3 years. It's not per year, it's for the next 3 years. So it's kind of a continuation of what we did with the summer reset overtime.
Thank you, Becky. Am I, Mr. Vice Chair, am I good to go on?
Let's go.
Okay. All right. So the next one we're going to talk about is cameras. There's a lot of stuff. I'm going to try to condense it. We currently have 190 cameras in the city that are viewed through Milestone. If you want to compare them to two other communities of our size, it would be Hartford and Bridgeport. Hartford has about 1,200 state-of-the-art cameras monitored through their C4, which is where we would monitor. It's called our Intel Center. They also use Milestone, and they have 31 license plate reader cameras throughout the city, which reads about 200 plates per week. Bridgeport has about 1,600 cameras in their Fusion Center. Again, the same concept as our Intel Center. They also use Milestone, and they have, I'm sorry, I can't see with where I have my people here. 20 license plate readers fixed throughout the city, and they read over 500 plates a week. So just to see where we are in comparison to the two other major cities in Connecticut.
Chief Dominguez, can you just briefly tell us, this is Alder Adam Marchand, what Milestone is? Milestone, is that some kind of software platform or something?
Yeah, Milestone is how we view our cameras. So it's the software that we're able to see all our cameras throughout the city and in the Intel Center, and the other two agencies use it as well, as does our Board of Education uses Milestone as well.
Thank you.
So what you're seeing here is where we have our current camera locations. All these little blue dots, and I realize they're small, but this is where we have our 190 cameras throughout the city. What you're going to see in the next couple of slides is how these cameras fit with our maps that we're using for data based on crime, and also different types of motor vehicle accidents that we have seen an uptick in, and we're trying to reduce and better investigate. So this one is the camera locations versus the city crime map. And you can see, if you look, we'll just use Westville over here. If you see this cluster and you look in the same map, we're lacking cameras over here. Many of these do have some areas. Fairhaven, the same, we're lacking some cameras over here. And then East Shore, Morris Cove up on Route 80, and throughout this section here, very minimal cameras up here. So this is just a side-by-side comparison. When we're looking at where we're going to utilize cameras, it's the data that is driving our locations. What do we currently have? What is our crime looking like? And how can we, marry the two together so that we can have the most productive camera system and, get into the solvability that we're looking for, especially for these crimes. This map here is homicides, assault with firearms, and confirmed shots fired. We'll look on the next one, and this is bike and pedestrian motor vehicle collisions. This is year to date. Again, you can see the clusters in red are where we see the majority of them, and where, if you look on the left side, where the cameras are lacking. And then this final comparison is fatals or incapacitating motor vehicle collisions. Again, you see this cluster over here in Westville, which kind of stands out with the lack of the cameras on the other side. But also even down here at the bottom of our map here, we don't see the same on this side as much. That could be helpful for us to be solving some of these fatal or incapacitating motor vehicle collisions. Please feel free to stop me if need be. Our current and in progress camera and LPR locations, you'll see the map on, or the key on this side. The blue again is our existing ones. And then you can see the other points. There's 20 camera locations that we're in the process of adding to the city in locations that we were able to identify as fiber already exists. So we can go into great detail on how these cameras work, but one of the simplest ways is where fiber already exists. It was the easiest for us to kind of pick 20 points on a line of fiber to be able to have an easy install, especially with COVID and manufacturing delaying some of our cameras to be able to be in. So we're trying to get, when we get the cameras, how can we easily install these onto fiber? And Becky and also Detective White and Captain Healy can discuss more in the weeds of that operation if we have any questions on that, definitely. So this is the camera proposal cost estimate. I can talk on this, or Mr. Gormany, if you would like to go on this, either way would be fine for me. We're proposing total cameras are 500 cameras. It's just giving you the breakdown of average cost per camera with install, total estimated camera costs. This is just miscellaneous servers. There's different ways that we connect. We can connect via fiber, we connect via point-to-point, we can connect via multi-point, and that's kind of talking about that there. The total estimated cost is in yellow. Equipment to receive and display the camera feeds, just an upgrade of that, so we're able to actually view them in our Intel Center. The annual maintenance is there at $90,000. The annual software for the license plate readers. Contingencies is the potentials of the things that we know could put a camera could cost more. We might not be able to connect to fiber. There's a bunch of categories that could fit into this. And then our total estimated camera project is approximately $3.8 million. Mr. Gormany or anybody on this?
No, Chief, I think you explained that fairly well.
Okay. So moving from the cameras is into ShotSpotter. So what we have here is a map of the city, and this red outline is where we currently have ShotSpotter coverage. We're about 5.5 square miles of the city that have ShotSpotter. So everything inside of this outlined line already has ShotSpotter. We've had a couple expansions over the years, and this is where we're currently sitting with ShotSpotter. What we're proposing is 4 additional locations, again, based off where we're seeing shots fired in the city and where we're lacking with the ShotSpotter. In the next one, we go into a little bit more detail, but this is up in Quinnipiac, Route 80 area. This is the rest of Fairhaven. So pretty much all of Fairhaven will have, we'll just kind of continue it out here because right now it stops at about Ferry Street. And then this is Westville and West Hills. This is Valley Street, which would get you all the way down to kind of Whaley Avenue. And then over here is Rockview, Westville Manor, and Brookside area. So taking the heat map again and looking at where we're looking to expand, again, it's data driven. So if you look at each of these spots that we have kind of pointed out with the red arrows, the first one, if we look at A, again, here's a cluster of shots fired that we're seeing that is not captured by ShotSpotter. So we're relying on people in the community to call, and many times echoes move where the shots actually are. So officers are not going and getting the ballistic evidence that's going to lead to investigations and solvability. or individuals aren't calling. Either they're afraid to call, they're assuming a neighbor called, or we don't get a call at all. So that is important for us, one, for speed of response. Many times the officers who have ShotSpotter on their MCTs, like Chet talked about, but also on their phones, are able to respond because the alert comes in even before they're dispatched to the call. So it shrinks down the response time. Again, this is D. This is the cluster over here that's not covered by ShotSpotter. And then C and B down here, just so you can see this cluster right here corresponds over here and again here. So the contract is a 4-year contract, and I will briefly talk about this, and then Alyssa is definitely the one who is well versed in here, and she can answer any further questions. So it's a 4-year term. The estimated contract is from January of 2022 through December of 2025. You have your total contract cost, proposed ShotSpotter ARPA funding of 1.2 million, and the estimated expenditure period would be from July of 2022 through April of 2025. Alyssa, I just don't want to misspeak here. So if you just want to jump in to quickly summarize this slide if I missed.
No, I think you hit upon it. The estimated contract period is just because we're, it's pending the board approval. And we wanted to highlight for you that the chief negotiated best she could. We think that almost 7 million was as good as it's going to get. We're asking for 1.2 million for those ARPA funds. So just trying to highlight that there will be a little bit of general fund expenditure coming up when that 1.2 million has been exhausted.
So that is the end for our camera proposal piece of the agenda, and then we go into the bonus for police lateral. So what I've tried to do
Chief
is—
Dominguez,
yes.
can I interrupt you for a moment?
Yes, sir.
I think this is Alder Marchand, Vice Chair of the committee. I think it might be worthwhile you saying briefly, or one of your team saying, in terms that all us lay people can understand, what do these technologies do for the police department in preventing or responding to crime?
So for ShotSpotter, we've seen, and since our inception, which is probably about 2009, that we get more accurate locations of where ShotSpotter is. We actually see it on a map, and we're able to say, the dispatcher who also has the technology is able to dispatch the officers and say, on the side of 123 Main Street, go down the driveway, and it's in the back next to a light post, because it's a Google map that will come up. And it can also show how many shots have been fired. It can show if it seems like if the target was moving, or if there was an exchange of gunfire. The technology is really vast. So it allows us to, one, be accurate in where we're responding. So we're sending officers immediately to the location. Also, we know what we're looking for. So someone calls in, I heard 4 shots, ShotSpotter says 8 shots. Now we know what we're looking for. If we're only finding 4 shell casings, maybe we need to expand our search. Maybe we need to, look at the map ourselves, so that the officer literally can stand on scene looking at the map and walking to exactly where it is. And it allows for areas where people are not calling for a variety of reasons, or with the echoes of how things are, we're getting a couple streets off, or, a parallel street where we're not finding anything. We're thinking, oh, this is unfounded. And actually it did occur, but we don't have that evidence to then be able to see these shell casings are also related to the shell case, a shooting that happened a week ago, a shooting in Hartford, because we do have the technology to test the shell casings and to make those connections, which is data that, if we wanted to discuss more on, Captain Healy could absolutely discuss. So it really is saving us time, making us more efficient, and allowing us to solve crimes and to link crimes. And even when there's nobody struck in some of these, the linking of the shell casings allows us to see trends, see pictures, and to realize if we're having a spike in a certain group, and be able to address those needs better than if we're unable to link all of these cases together.
Thank you for that. And the cameras?
The cameras as well. So the cameras are very important for a multitude of reasons. One, solvability. If you look at Bridgeport, their solvability far exceeds our solvability for shootings and homicides. And it's not only because of the cameras, but it's a big piece of the cameras. When you have 1,500 cameras to pull from versus our 190 cameras, that's a big, huge difference. The other thing is, I believe that we do community policing better than any of these neighborhoods, and we have these connections with the community. So having that already, and then adding the cameras on to be able to facilitate these investigations quicker, we would drive up our solvability numbers for sure. And then we could use these, it's not just for violent crime. We have to think of a way that we're able to look at all of crime, that we have to think about the car break-ins that are happening when we're having these different kinds of spikes throughout the year, being able to have video footage that we don't have to go knocking on doors trying to get private businesses footage. We have our own cameras that we're able to use. Obviously, we're still going to do canvases. We're still going to look at to try to get all the video, but to be able to have a starting point with our own cameras in our own intel center just helps us to be able to better respond, quicker respond. And I can tell a very quick story. I went to see the Bridgeport Fusion Center with Captain Healy and Detective White, just to see how they do it. So we're watching the big bank of cameras and we see a little bit of activity in one of the cameras, and Detective White says, I think there's just a shooting there. So we watch a shooting happen on camera. Just so happened that the camera was pointed to that, because 1,500 cameras, you're not going to be watching them all. As we're watching it, ShotSpotter comes in. The detectives who are in the room are able to coordinate the response from patrol because they're watching what's going on. By the time the patrol officers responded, the area was clear. Nobody was there, but we had watched the individual without a mask walk up to the victim, shoot him, run into a store. He handed off the weapon to the store. The store closed. They weren't answering for the police when they got there. We were able to say, you're at the right door. The police, the Bridgeport police. And in about 15 minutes, they had the individual's picture up on a department app, which is called Slack, which we have as well. The person was identified. They were able to get access into the store. They were able to locate the weapon within 15 minutes. So it couldn't have been choreographed better for me watching it, but it was just amazing that was able to happen that fast. That's how the solvability, that's how this is so important.
Thank you, Chief Dominguez. I'm sure colleagues will have follow-up questions, but why don't we continue? Thank you so much.
And then we have the bonuses for police laterals. So new recruits versus police laterals. A new recruit is someone who has no police experience, goes through the testing process like we just began and we're in the process of now, and we see an academy. So we're saying if we're going to see an academy of 30 new recruits, it's going to cost total academy $953,000, $953,000 plus. The time in the academy is going to be about 11 months. They're in the academy for 8 of those months, and then the next 3 months they're on FTO. So from the minute we hire them and seat them into the academy, we're not seeing those officers as being sole police officers until 11 months later. When you look at laterals already are certified police officers. They're able to come over and transfer over to the New Haven Police Department. The total bonus cost, if we were going to give $10,000 to 30 laterals, would be $300,000. There's onboarding costs, which would be equipment and some other costs that also the new recruits would get, and that is about $96,000. The maximum time that we would have them from hire to on the street is 3 months. And that's if there's no academy. This is assuming Connecticut laterals, because if they were out of state, they may have to do some law changes, might have to go to the academy because not everything is the same. And for the max would be 3 months in FTO. And that would be someone who maybe was separated from service for a little bit longer, wasn't, coming over, didn't know our computer system, things like that. So the cost savings is about for 30 new officers, $557,000, where we're able to get officers faster, and we're able to get officers who already have a basis, are already certified, already understand the criminal law, have already been through another police department. And officers come over for a multitude of reasons. I'm a transfer. I was at the Newtown Police Department for 2 years, and I chose to come here. and wanting to be a New Haven police officer. So there are many reasons why, as is Chief Jacobson, there are many reasons why people lateral into a big city. They come here because of all that we can afford them. So we're in a place where we're looking to entice more individuals to come just to make that process faster and to have qualified applicants who are already coming in. We know we do a background check, we do all that as well, but it's already been done once for one police department. So we're just giving, we're doing it a second time, and anything that would have been missed, we would have gotten, we hope we would find that, this second time around. Becky? Anything I'm missing?
I think the other thing to add is just the rolling list that we're allowed to do with laterals allows us to do it more frequently. A class of 30 has a longer lead time to even get them into the academy. So there's a benefit of that. And, we are seeing about 2 to 3 applicants every time we post laterals, but there's a lot of competition and a lot of other departments recruiting laterals. And we really think the bonus will help us, to push us over the top for people making that decision.
Okay, and
I believe that was the last slide,
Yep.
Chief.
Yes,
So
it is.
Vice Chair Marchand, do you want me to go in with the IT director regarding the positions? We're doing 2 and 3 together, right?
Yes, we are doing items 2 and 3 together. Please do a concise presentation about the transfers and how they relate to this first item.
Absolutely. So we are looking to transfer funding from expenditure reserve account, which the Board of Alders approved in the fiscal year 2021-22 budget, for these 2 positions. The networking positions are very important, not just in regards to the camera project and the IT infrastructure projects that you heard here, but just to the overall IT network alone. Currently, we have 1 or 2 network individuals in the city to monitor our entire camera system, as well as other IT network infrastructure. And again, IT network is the backbone of the city. It's everything that runs from the IT website to the data centers that you heard Mr. Sawicki talking about, to just overall data and residency access to the city. So I'm going to turn it over to our IT director, Chet, to give a little bit more insight in like 2 or 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'll keep it brief. Basically, I don't have much more to add beside what Michael had stated already. I mean, the only thing I'll add is the infrastructure that runs through the city is very complex, and having 2 network admins right now, they are maxed out trying to support the infrastructure today. In the addition of adding 500 additional cameras, plus the infrastructure that's going to be needed to require that to keep that system running, such as fiber and different connections in the area, that is not going to be possible with the current staffing that we have today. So that's just a little more details on that. But yeah, I don't have anything else really to add.
So as we get more into the IT department working with city departments such as transportation, traffic, and parking on the streetlights and other IT infrastructure and enhancing those networks, these 2 positions will be vital to our IT department. Again, it's not just IT, but our IT network serves the city as a whole in relation to cameras, data access, and all other major areas of the city. These are already existing 3144 positions within the bargaining unit. The transfer that is requested is $155,000 in base salary for these 2 IT positions. And yes, if they were approved, it becomes a permanent part of the budget. So that is $155,000 that is added to the budget now and in future years. But again, with the way the direction the city is going in regards to IT, these positions are definitely needed. So Vice Chair Marchand, I believe that concludes the presentation for both item number 2 and 3, and to open it up for questions from the committee members.
Thank you, Acting Controller Gormany, and thank you to the Chief and Director Sawicki, Deputy CAO Bombero, everybody who's been part of the presentation team. We're grateful for that. We're going to transition now to questions from committee members. Before we do, I'm just going to thank everybody who's attending this meeting for their patience. That was a lot of information to get through. I do know that there are 3 people who've requested to give public testimony. So the 3 of you, I have acknowledged your requests. You will be on the queue. You will have your opportunity to ask your questions or make your comments after the members of the committee have asked theirs. And just as a reminder to committee members, there were basically 5, maybe 6 components of what we heard. We heard the IT infrastructure. We heard the overtime proposal. We heard cameras and shot stopper. We heard money for bonuses to entice lateral transfers. And then we heard the transfer of funds to support 2 new additional IT support positions. So those are the component parts of this $12 million item that and the $155,000 transfer that's before us. So now we're going to go through our list. I'm just double checking who's still here. We'll begin with Alder Morrison. Questions?
No, Mr. Vice Chair, I don't have any questions. The presentation was very specific, very laid out. And in speaking in layman's terms, it helped me to understand how these different resources are going to affect the people. And for me, that's always just the bottom line. You need money, you need items, but how is that going to reflect in the community on the day-to-day? And you guys did a really good job with laying that out. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Alder Morrison. Next, Alder Festa.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I do have some questions. I appreciate everyone's thoroughness in their presentation, but I do have some concerns, particularly regarding the cameras. And Vice Chair, I'm not sure how I'm going to keep everything to 4 questions because we had a lot of info dumping to us this evening, but a concern is with the cameras, will they use facial recognition or some form of artificial intelligence? And why I ask is because we would probably want some kind of policy on whether or not this is allowed before these cameras are installed. And I understand we have some already out there, but we need to make sure we cross our T's, dot our I's.
I can answer as you go, ma'am. Is that okay? This is not facial recognition technology. There is none of that on the cameras or on the license plate readers. All it does is read letters on the actual license plate. So nothing to do with facial recognition.
Okay, thank you for that. Also, regarding the data centers, why do we need a 3rd data center? Why are we not using the cloud when many other facilities companies, including our federal government, either outsource this or use the cloud? Can someone explain that, please?
So I left off a key part. We back up our data to each one of our data centers today. We also back it up to the cloud. So we are utilizing the cloud today. There is a cost associated with storing data in the cloud. A lot of our applications are cloud-based. They have migrated to the cloud, so they exist up in the cloud. The CAT RMS system that we are talking about moving forward with, we are looking for a cloud-based software application if there is one that meets our needs on that. So we are migrating to the cloud. Having multiple data centers allows us to pivot quicker than we could if we were in the cloud. And it actually is more cost effective for certain areas, not for everything, but for certain areas when it gets to data. The data storage that we have on premise today in our storage area network, SAN, our SAN, our storage area network, that's been paid for. We have that in-house today. We have all of our virtual servers running in-house today. So for us to pivot and put up new software, it could sometimes be a lot cheaper and easier for us to manage if it's on-prem versus cloud. And again, that's not 100% all the time. We take that case by case, looking at who's using the software, what it's going to be used for, how they're going to access it, the security needed for that software. And we take all that into consideration when we look at these choices, whether it's going to be migrated to the cloud or whether it's going to sit in a data center, whether it's going to go our main data center, or whether it's going to go in our data center over at 1 Union Avenue. And then having the third data center, like I said, just gives us that more capability, that much more capability, as well as allowing us to put a milestone server at the Wintergreen Avenue, so any cameras there don't have to traverse the entire fiber infrastructure of the city, or however they are connected, to get back to the city. It'll go to a local server there. It'll make everything faster as far as viewing the cameras.
And the question about outsourcing?
Outsourcing, sorry, what was the question on that?
It was just included in all, kind of in my whole question, about data center and why don't we consider outsourcing?
Thank you, Alderfest. I think Mr. Sawicki was referring to that portion of the question on we take it on a case-by-case basis, really. There are items and software and programs that we do outsource currently that are cloud-based solutions. But I think it's really on a case-by-case basis on what we have stored on premises, on those servers, and then what we store in the cloud. So we do some of a combination of what you said in your question. It's just a matter of the type of service that's being provided. Did I get all of that, Chet, or?
Yes, correct. So if we were to look back 10 years ago, the size of the data center was probably 3 times, 4 times what it is today. We have migrated a lot of our applications up to the cloud. So we have outsourced a lot of applications up to the cloud. We have a lot of our infrastructure running in the cloud. There still is the need to run components on premise. So when we put up servers, there's a virtual server, but there's a server box somewhere running that's carved up into 100, 200, 300 servers, but there is still a physical space needed to house this equipment and to keep it operational.
And I think, Alderfest, one last quick point is I think one of the things we look at is disaster recovery as well. Having redundancy with the data centers is always one of the best practices that we've seen in the IT world in case, one data center goes down, things aren't slowing down or we're not losing data. As Mr. Sawicki mentioned, we have reduced the size of the data centers that we have. So again, I think it goes back to that case-by-case basis as far as what's in the cloud versus what we have on premises.
Thank you for that. That was helpful. But I guess what I meant by using outside resources was a third-party vendor.
A third-party vendor for what? I guess I'm not understanding the question. For the actual data center, or a third-party vendor to run software?
Probably both, or one or the other.
Yeah. So we don't have a.
Sorry, instead of a third center.
Yeah, I mean, there is the ability to do that. They call those co-location, where we could pay a monthly amount and it goes to a vendor. And then in the event that there was an incident where our data center was down, we would take our tape backups, things like that, go to these remote locations. We would spin up our backups, bring up our servers, do all the communication cutovers to get that operational. There is a time that's associated with that, which would involve a longer outage period.
Also, Alderfest, if I may, I think we often talk about the question of ongoing costs versus capital expenditures, and especially with ARPA funding. I think here's an opportunity, if it is located on our own property, it is more of a one-time expense rather than a continual expense out into the future. Also, there is the question of survivability in case of emergencies. If we have our own data centers, we have a bit more control over that as opposed to, emergency events that may affect our ability to get to the cloud.
Okay, thank you for that. Are these cameras mobile? Will they be able to move around, and how are they in the dark?
So the cameras would not be mobile. What's that, ma'am?
Can we change locations? When I mean by mobile, can we change it from one location to another when necessary?
So those on the fiber, no, we wouldn't be able to. Becky, do you want to, see on mute? Go ahead.
But yeah, they are like, we own the asset. So to the extent of that, we could reprioritize the location. But as the chief indicated, they are dependent on the infrastructure that supports them. So like right now, we do have one cellular based camera that we do move as necessary, but the reliability on those are far lower. So these will be hardwired into the system or point to point. So they're location specific, but that's one of the reasons we're using data to support it. But if there's a location that we pick that is completely useless to us, we could use that camera and somewhere else. But the true cost is not necessarily the camera that we're buying, but the infrastructure install, et cetera.
Gotcha. Thank you. And they work well in the dark?
The newer model cameras work much better in the dark than the ones we initially installed in the city many years ago.
Thank you. Mr. Vice Chair, I do have additional questions I will yield to my colleagues at this time, but hopefully you will come around if they are not answered. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Festa. Next is Alder Furlong.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. The way this information is coming to us, it feels like I've gone to the grocery store and forgot something and had to keep going back because everything is coming to us in these pieces. So through you, Mr. Chair, I think it will be helpful. Interim Chief Dominguez gave such a thorough presentation with additional numbers that we don't have of the breakdown. So through you, or at least I didn't see it in the package. So through you, Mr. Chair, if we can get a copy of those numbers and how we got to the final number of the police part, that would be very helpful. Also, I think it will be helpful. Some of this I think needs to go before safety because there were just so many questions on the cameras and other things that are valid questions that it may seem like we may need a workshop to understand this better. Just very quickly, the 500 cameras that we're getting, are they replacing the 190 we already have, or is it in addition to?
A very small number would be replacing just because some are in need of an upgrade. So, but overall, it is to augment what we currently have. So, and so that we could become closer to, some of the other major cities in Connecticut.
Okay, and I saw in your presentation that there was about, I don't remember the number, might be wrong, 95,000 that will deal with software for the LPR cameras, but in the proposal, it doesn't list the number that we will have, or maybe you did say it in your presentation. I'm not sure. So are we going to have the LPR cameras? Because our proposal says that we may have them, but then we have 95,000 in software included in this price.
So our proposal is, yes, is for cameras, and I can pull it up. It's on one of the slides. Let me just.
You can even send it to us,
okay.
Chief Dominguez, so through you, Mr. Chair, if we can get that additional information. And one other request I would have, and then I'll yield, through you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, if we can get where we have current cameras. I did see the dots. And if we can get a general idea of where these new cameras are going to be installed, the 500 or so, I think that would be very helpful. So that's through you, Mr. Vice Chair, if I may, and I yield back to you. Thank you, Chief Dominguez, and our other IT person, Mr. Gormany. Excellent presentation.
Yes, Alder Furlow, we will definitely, the chair and I will follow up with those requests that you made, and definitely we will also want to see, have the entire presentation sent to all the members of the committee, which I think will help. Spending a little bit more time with each page may help bring some of those numbers more firmly into our minds as well. Thank you, sir. Alder Rodriguez.
Yes, I have one question. Thank you, Vice Chair. As I look at everything that's been discussed here, and once again, I'd like to say thank you to the chief for her explanation and trying to bring it down in layman's term, the request that has been made here in reference to the $12 million in reference to communication and upgrading data systems. Where I'm a little concerned, and I'd like to hear a little more, is on the aspect of community policing and the collaborative proposal in reference to improving what we already have in reference to environment as we look at cameras and where we place them. What about our areas that are totally dark, or our lightings, or possibly cameras where the trees are hovering? So is there a proposal that I don't see here among everything that has been discussed with important departments to improve the safety so that when these cameras come in, it helps all around? And as our Majority Leader Furlow indicated, it would be good that our safety committee eventually at some point in time review a number of the requests that have been made. Thank you.
So I'll speak to a piece of that on kind of like the camera placement piece that you touched, ma'am. Thank you for that. It is definitely important that where we are going to be placing cameras are where we currently don't have cameras, coupled with the data as to, you know, the pieces that we showed in those maps, the different items, but also making sure, working with parks, working with, you know, all the other city agencies, we're not going to put a camera if we can't trim a tree because of the type of tree it is. So being very particular and painstaking as to making sure we have enough lighting in the area, and can we enhance lighting that would make the cameras look, you know, the views look better at night? Can we get rid of a tree, or make sure we're trimming it or move it just a little bit, or, you know, so that, or the view is not blocked by a building. So yes, all of these things to make sure that our cameras are going to be able to give us the best views. And in the same time, it will increase the safety of the community in those areas. One, because there'll be more camera footage, but also there'll be better lighting. Potentially there'll be less trees that would be blocking the view and things like that. If that helps a little bit.
Yes, yes, that does help a little bit. Thank you, because I see that you're thinking and you're planning effectively in respect to our legislative agenda and looking at environment. It would be cost effective that as we include these improvements to our entire city and the police department, that we also make sure that we include that environmental clean neighborhood piece. Thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair Marchand.
Thank you, Alder Rodriguez. Alder Hurt. Alder Hurt, you're currently muted. I can tell that you're speaking, but we cannot hear you.
I am speaking. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I wanted to say that all of our presenters were thorough in their presentation. The answers to my questions have been answered, and I want to Just thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Alder Hurt. Alder Decker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Alder Festa anticipated one of my main questions, which was about the facial recognition and AI situation. And I would echo her calls to, should we approve these cameras and get them built, that this board should undertake, figuring out what we actually want to do there. I have one other question pertaining to the cameras, and then I'm going to have one other question. So, Chief Dominguez, you mentioned in your presentation, which of course is very thorough, but you compared our current camera situation here in New Haven to Hartford and to Bridgeport. And so that was informative. But my question for you is there evidence that the much higher number of cameras in those two cities has actually deterred crime?
So I think it's difficult to be able to say what we don't have, like what crime doesn't happen. But what I would say is it is knowing that city residents knowing that there's cameras in certain areas allows for better for people to be better able to know what is going on and to potentially police themselves, if you will, knowing you're being watched. Same thing with body cameras, right? So like we use those as a tool to help us, but also to help the officers be better officers. So it's allowing the community to know that there's cameras in the area, aware that there's cameras, and also to be able to curb behavior in a way of what is acceptable behavior, what we're allowing as a community, as a city. And then also, I'm sorry, I'm losing it over here with my daughter. She wants Lucky Charms.
No, if I could add to what the chief is saying too. We looked at studies in Baltimore and Chicago, and it was a lot about cost saving, but it was also about, in Chicago, they found that even beyond the camera coverage areas, they saw a reduction in crime because people got used to, there's cameras. There is not that, and I don't want to say the wrong terminology too. It's not that you're being watched. It's that, hey, let's all watch each other, like the chief was saying. And physical public surveillance and civil liberties can coexist if they're implemented correctly. And I would say, look at the chief's and our administration's track record of implementing technology. Not that it was a good thing, but we recently had to arrest an officer for the misuse of technology. So these are things that when we put these cameras in place, the policies will be correct. The administration will watch to make sure the officers are using them properly. And then back to what the chief says, it's not only a reduction to help us solve. Why we pointed out Bridgeport and Hartford is they have high solvability for homicides. They're at like 70%. We're hoping that gets us higher solvability for homicide. They're not as good at preventing crime maybe as we are because our numbers are lower than theirs, but we also will use this as another tool in our toolbox to help get our numbers down, to help get those solves. And what the theories are, and they're backed up by data, is, you get solves, but then you even seen crime reduction in areas where there aren't any cameras. So the technology helps. And the end of that Chicago study was that for every dollar they spent on technology, they saved $4 in the city because they weren't responding to homicides and shootings and trauma and everything else. So that was quite interesting. And one of those things that's kind of like, this is something that we do a lot of things right, but we need to do more and do better to reduce our numbers. So it was just something that was going to get us there. The other thing I would say too is it shows witnesses. Like you're going to have camera footage of who was there. Now that disrupts your stop snitching code, right? Because it's not like they're snitching. There's video of them being there. There's video of them witnessing the homicide. So there's a lot of positive things that come from the camera footage when it comes to an investigation.
Thank you both. That was helpful context. My second and final question pertains to the ShotSpotter technology, and I want to phrase this carefully because we're the finance committee, and what we have before us is the allocation of these ARPA funds and less about the actual policy. So saying that, I would actually echo the call of the majority leader and the deputy majority leader in trying to figure out if there is a workshop that we can have about the actual policy itself. But given the potential, large outlay that we're being asked for ShotSpotter, I'm sure you're all aware of the articles that came out last month, raising questions about basically, that ShotSpotter technology, that there have been convictions in certain cities overturned because judges have cast doubt on parts of the technology. That's not a universal experience, but it is a concern that I, read about recently. I think Rochester and Chicago were the two cities. And so I would just ask, again, since we're talking about a financial outlay, if the chief or the assistant chief or another PD rep could talk just in a little bit more detail about the department's own experience of, once there's been an activation of ShotSpotter, once, what happens next. I'm trying to be careful about how I'm about keeping it to the question of the finances, but I guess I just want to make sure that we're not, potentially setting ourselves up for expensive processes down the road, if that makes sense.
We've had ShotSpotter since 2009 with two different expansions, one in 2017, a small one, and then again, or a little bit of a large one, and then one in 2019, where expanded into Fairhaven. So this will be our fourth request for an expansion. During that time, so what happens is this technology is on our officers, supervisors, desktops, laptops, in the cars, phones. Every officer has a department issued phone, and also in PSAP. So when the ShotSpotter technology comes out and is an alert, then they will immediately dispatch the officers to the area. And it allows us to give more information to the officers because it is, you have a map, you have a number, and you have a specific location. Officers then respond to the scene. If they're able to locate shell casings, they do so. It helps us if a lot of times ShotSpotter happens and it's a shooting. So it brings us to these locations where we're able to render aid to individuals, to get witnesses right away. So we're able to get to a scene before people are able to maybe not be there who were there and potentially witness the incident. And then from there, it goes as any other police investigation. A report is written. The detective bureau may or may not come out depending on the case. And then we further our investigation utilizing the evidence that we're able to collect from the scene, link those shell casings to any other shell casings, potentially just kind of build a map of where we're seeing gun violence and be able to address it in a more strategic way as we meet daily in our intel meetings. So we're able to take all this information and kind of collectively discuss it.
Thank you for that. And I also hope that you appreciate that my questions aren't meant to impugn the investigative work of your department, but are simply about making sure if we're making an outlay for tools that they're like the most effective, accurate tools that we can get.
Absolutely. And
if I could just add to that, Chief, the technology I think you're referring to, because I did read about that, is the use of the audio of ShotSpotter for more than just the detection of the gunfire. That's, again, implementation, making sure we implement it correctly and making sure officers are using it correctly. And we've never had that type of issue because we use it just for what it's supposed to be used for. And we shouldn't have those issues because we're going to be strict on how it has been implemented. We've had it sit for quite a long time and we've had none of those issues, and we will work vigilantly not to have any of those issues. But I know exactly what you're talking about, and we just haven't had those issues. But thank you for the question. It was good.
And I appreciate the clarifications. I have no further questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Decker. What I would like to do now is I would like to go to the public portion. We have at least 3 individuals who indicated some time ago that they wish to testify, and I would like to give them that opportunity. But I would ask the city staff who've presented to stick around, because you might need an opportunity after the public have spoken to give further information or to ask further questions from the committee. So thank you for your presentation. Thank you for sticking around. And now we'll proceed to the public portion. I'm aware of 3 people who've requested to testify: Chaz Carmen, Reverend Steele, and Kim Harris. And so, Mr. Lucas, if you could promote Chaz Carmen, please. Mr. Carmen.
Yes, I'm here. It had me. Here it is. It's allowing me to now.
If you're able to turn on your camera, we would love to be able to see you. There you are, sir. Name and address for the record, please.
Chaz Carmen, 900 Chapel Street, New Haven, Connecticut, 06510.
Please, go ahead.
Okay. So I want to start off. I'm the president of Ice the Beef in New Haven and Waterbury. I just want to start off and talk about, firstly, in our city right now and all across the state, we are seeing deaths, shootings of children and our residents. People are losing loved ones almost every day. Children, 14, 15, 16-year-olds are getting shot and some murdered. We need, as a city, to help any way we can. We need to help bring some of these people to justice who are causing these acts. We need to get a sense of closure for families. And I say a sense because we understand that there's no way to bring loved ones back. We need to invest any way we can in ways to stop gun violence and bring these people to justice. Let's face it, people are scared to say something. People don't want to get killed themselves. So if we had more cameras, updated cameras, we can possibly get more information of these shootings. We need to make sure that there are cameras where the shootings are happening. And remember, children are dying and being shot. Our residents are being murdered with little to no information. Yes, we talked about the not snitching rule. And I want to piggyback off Chief Jacobson. Everything he said was totally spot on. So any way we can help as a people, we need to. The feeling of having a child, a student, a mentee shot and killed is devastating to the family, to the community. And even when the student is not murdered, the pieces that you have to pick up as a mentor, as a teacher, as a parent, as a community resident, the pieces that you have to pick up. How do you tell this child that life is going to be okay after you were shot? We need help. Any way we can invest in gun violence prevention, we as a community and family need to take these measures. Remember, these youth, these residents are all our children. They're all our family members. And we need to do all we can to help them. And cameras is a step in the right direction. So I heard what they said earlier, and just sinking into my head that New Haven has 190 cameras and Bridgeport has 1,500. Cameras do deter crime. I've been a criminal, and you're not gonna go and do a crime where you know cameras are. Just not. You need to see also the faces. The camera's got to be able to see more than just plates. They got to be able to see if there was a shooting in this neighborhood and people were there. They need to see the people who are there. They need to see the shooter as best of their ability. A mentee of mine, house was shot up in the Dixville neighborhood. And in a minute and a half, the cops were at the door. Shot spotters do work. So we need as a community to invest more in the gun violence prevention. We need as a community to have more cameras because they will deter crime, and then we can get pertinent information to our department. And then people, if they don't want to snitch, they might not have to because we got information on the camera. So I think this is a step in the right direction to invest in more cameras for our city, and our city would be safer if we do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carmen. Appreciate your testimony. We're now going to move to the next person in the queue for public testimony, which is Reverend Steele, followed by Kim Harris. And I do see 2 additional people who've raised their hands. I will call on you folks in turn. Reverend Steele, we are ready when you are.
Good evening, distinguished committee members and our capable chief.
I just want to go on record. My home address is 235 Bellevue Road, but I'm the Reverend Kelsey G.L., still the pastor of the Barrett Memorial AME Zion Church on Dixwell. And I just want to go on record to say that I'm in full support of the police department's request to purchase 500 new cameras and to expand the shot spotter detection system into Fairhaven and West Rock. As we know, ShotSpotter, it provides a real-time alert to law enforcement of detecting gunfire so that they can arrive at the precise location of a shooting safely and quickly. And with the speed of response, officers can be on the scene to aid the victims, to interview witnesses, and to collect the evidence. And this improves the overall effectiveness of the agency in identifying and apprehending shooters and taking illegal guns off the streets. And so this technology upgrade will allow the police to police smarter and be more proactive than reactive when it comes to responding to and investigating shooting incidents across the city, especially in our BIPOC community, our Black and Brown community. With the summer that we had this year, with the uptick in gun violence, I'm all for it. And I question the motives of those who are not, because we are tired of our children dying. We are tired of senseless gun violence. We are tired of our community being left on the other side of the digital divide by the cameras, the more the merrier. And in a society where people are more afraid of being a snitch than giving information and tips to solve homicide, I say let the cameras do the talking, because so many times shootings have taken place on Dixwell and the police will come by our office, our church, to use our surveillance cameras, which pretty much was purchased at Walmart, and many of times didn't even yield any support to them. And I've had my car broken into 2 times since living in New Haven, and 1 time in my church parking lot with my title, pastor. Cameras are needed. Our catalytic converter was recently stolen off our church van while in our parking lot with no witnesses. We've just recently partnered with Fridge Haven, and we're housing a 24-hour fridge in our parking lot, and we've already received reports of residents stealing the food and selling it. Yesterday, we installed another Walmart Wi-Fi cam so that we can monitor the activity. My brothers and sisters, we need fewer workshops and more witnesses. Buy the cameras. Please buy the cameras. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Pastor Steele. We appreciate your testimony. Next, we will have Kim Harris, and after her, Ron Huggins and Stacy Spell.
Good evening to all. My name is Kim Harris. My address is 29 Lander Street. To the Vice Chair and Alders, thank you for allowing me to share my thoughts. Today, I'm here to talk in support of this evening's proposal. Crime has soared in my community. Today, I want to speak about what I've seen in my neighborhood, which is New Hallville. We are living in a time that we are just experiencing things that we've never experienced in my lifetime. My street has been plagued with gun violence and crime. The residents, especially our children and our youth and our seniors, have been put in harm's way. We have cameras in our neighborhood, and sometimes they're very necessary because, as we all know, a picture speaks 1,000 words. But what is very necessary is that our cameras must have systems that will allow for ongoing service and maintenance. In the past, we've had some challenges with crime, and we've not been able to pick up a picture because the camera wasn't working, or the camera might have been pointing in the wrong direction because of nature. It's time, it's really time for us to really do some other things to make a difference. Today, my ask is this. My ask is, in this very important moment, that we have ongoing services that we have maintenance, and that we have accountability. You know, when are people servicing our cameras? When are they giving us the data that shows that these things are happening ongoing? And there's accountability for that. And I think the other thing that we have a real grand opportunity to do, we have a chance here to use this time and this moment for some of our future workforce to see how our systems work in our neighborhood. And what I would like to say in closing is this. We should all be mindful to keep in mind, it's better to have working cameras when we don't need them than to need them when we don't have them. To the chair, to the vice chair, thank you so much for this time to speak.
Thank you, Ms. Harris. Next, we will have Ron Huggins, followed by Stacy Spell. Mr. Lucas, if you could promote Mr. Huggins, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening.
Name and address for the record, please.
Well, Ron Huggins, 15 Westerly Road, New Haven, Connecticut.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Again, thank you for this time. I stand here in full support of the cameras and of the ShotSpotter expansion program and camera expansion. In my work, I live by a model, two models. The first one being that crime is about desire and opportunity. And while we can't change people's desires to commit the crimes that they commit, things like cameras and ShotSpotter help to limit the opportunities that individuals have to commit those crimes. And so I stand here in full support of that expansion. And in addition, I'd like to tune into a story. After a homicide, Chief Jacobson and myself, we were out doing a canvas in one of the neighborhoods, and we were speaking with one of the people who were affected. The crime happened right in front of their house, and they spoke to how one of the city cameras were down that could have potentially helped to capture that crime. And so a couple weeks later, we went by, did another canvas just to check in with their family after giving them a bike and a couple other things. And I said, well, where are the kids at? I don't see them outside. And Mom said, you know, I really just don't feel safe knowing that that city camera potentially is down. And so what that did for me, in my role, I actually wrote a grant and was able to purchase about 200 Ring cameras to give out throughout the city to help parents similar to that parent feel comfortable to have their kids outside throughout our city. And so the reason for me sharing that story is to pretty much plead with you guys to wholeheartedly support this expansion of ShotSpotter and the expansion of cameras with no reserve. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Huggins. We appreciate your testimony. Mr. Spell, I believe you've been promoted.
Good evening, Vice Chair, Alder Marchant and all. My name is Stacy R. Spell. My address is 157 Church Street, the 25th floor. Thank you for the opportunity allowing me to provide public testimony in support of items 2 and 3. I can't speak enough about the collection of data and the necessity of it. Here in New Haven, we are data-driven in our law enforcement efforts. Any enhancement that could occur would only benefit the city and the New Haven Police Department. I can't speak enough about the expansion of ShotSpotter and the procurement of 500 additional cameras as well as the lateral transfers. We're living in a time where we need to enhance the tools that are on law enforcement's tool belt. Any additional tools that will help them with solvability, response, is much needed. I hope that the Board of Finance will seriously consider and approve the allocation of the ARPA funds to be utilized for this purpose. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spell, for your testimony. I want to thank everybody from the public who has testified. I'm going to give another shout out for the public to raise their hands if they wish to testify. Um, Would anybody from the public wish to testify on items 2 and 3? For a second time, would anybody from the public wish to testify on items 2 or 3? And for a third time, would any member of the public wish to testify on items 2 or 3? Okay, I think we're about to move on. I'm not certain there was any question or issue that the city staff or the applicants, the proponents of this need to answer, given that all of the testimony was in support of the proposal. And so given the time, I would like to move us on to the next item. And I would like to thank Chief Dominguez, Assistant Chief Jacobson, Ms. Ebsen, Deputy CAO Bombero, IT Director Chet Sawicki, Captain Healy, Steve Librandi, thank you all for being here. I didn't mention you, Mr. Gormany, because you're not going anywhere, because you're here for our final item. The always very exciting pre-audit report.
I told you, I'm with you for the whole night. So Michael Gormany, 45 Jefferson Road, Brentford, Connecticut. And I will share my screen. Set up. And I know it's been a long night with a lot of information, so I will try to keep this very high level. All right. So each year we publish a pre-audit report, or as the ordinance says, transferring negative line items for the preceding fiscal year. This is required by the city charter and code of ordinance that we submit this budgetary transfer. This is to satisfy that requirement. It does not have a material effect on our audit or any other financial statements that the city is currently working on related to fiscal year 21. But what this will show is where we believe we ended. Again, we are going through the fiscal year 21 audit with our external auditors, RSM, and hope to be completed by December or January, barring any unforeseen circumstances. In the past, as our auditors have testified to most recently about the fiscal year 20 audit, the numbers really haven't changed significantly or materially from the pre-audit. So we are very confident that the numbers that I'm presenting before you will not change materially or significantly as we go through the numbers here. The city has 4 major funds that make up the city fund balance. The general fund, which is the city's primary operating account, our litigation fund, which is litigation settlements for court cases settled through the litigation settlement committee, our medical self-insurance fund, which is the overall city self-insured medical fund for claims and other expenses, and our workers' comp fund. As you can see here, all 4 major funds ended fiscal year 2021 on a pre-audit basis in a positive amount. The litigation fund was about $1 million between revenues and expenses. Medical was $952,000, a little bit more than $952,000. Workers' comp was right on balance, and the general fund ended about a $9,200 surplus. Earlier on in the fiscal year, I was projecting a deficit in the previous monthly reports based on patterns that we've seen in just overall expenditures related to medical, workers' comp, police and fire overtime, and a host of other expenditures, and some revenue declines that we were seeing, such as meter receipts, tags, and in other revenue areas. The numbers did come out better than expected for fiscal year 21, which is the result that you see in front of you. So with all four major funds, we see about a $2 million surplus going into fiscal year 21 based on the pre-audit. The next box below shows how those operating results affect the city's fund balance. So you take a look at the operating results here, and they're plugged in here. You see the previous year's fund balance, which in aggregate total is $17.9 million. With the $2 million operating surplus between all four major funds, we would actually be increasing the fund balance to $19.9 million, very close to $20 million. So just going quickly through some of the results that we've seen in the general fund. On the revenue side, starting out with taxes, we did see about $2.5 million in collections above budget. That is very consistent with the previous years, slightly down, but still consistent as far as we are maintaining the tax collection budget, primarily in delinquent and real estate property. Our state revenue came in just about on budget. We did have some variances between when the budget was adopted and our actual revenue, but we were about $636,000 short, so very close on budget. Just a few minor changes in a few revenue categories that the city received as far as state aid. In license permits and fees, the major fees that we have in this category are parking meters. We ended the year about $3.3 million in actual collections. Again, we talked about COVID having an impact on actual meters and permit receipts. That was definitely a driver of not meeting budget for fiscal year 21, the primary driver, but it still came in better than we actually projected during the fiscal year. We were really about the $3 million number during the fiscal year to 3.1, so it did come in slightly better. Building permits had a very positive impact on the city's revenue for fiscal year 21. As we talked throughout the year, even during COVID, we continued to see great economic development within the city. We did see some projects not begin on time, but a majority of the projects that our building official had on schedule did come to fruition. And you can see by the actual revenue that we did receive, we actually got $3 million above budget for fiscal year 21. So again, that's a very positive story that we continue to see economic development in New Haven. On this next page, the areas I want to highlight really are interest income. We did see a dip in that. That is our short-term investments on the bank accounts, primarily our general fund that we see. Again, banks had very low rates, low CD rates, low return rates. So that did have an effect on our actual interest income for fiscal year 21. So a great thing that people are getting low rates in the banking market and investment market, but that does have an effect on what we do earn in our bank account. Parking tags is the other major area that we see. Parking tags was really a result of COVID-19, again, with folks not parking and being downtown and in other areas. That did affect the meter receipts, but again, that also affects the parking tags for any violations that we see. And it's not just parking violations, but other areas and other violations. With more people staying home, there's less violations written. And again, we talked about midway through the year on, we did have vacancies within that department as well. So that also did have an effect on the number of tickets written in just various violations. The next set of revenue categories that we see are the NHPA pilot. We talked about that again with garages and everything that the NHPA manages. They've seen a decline in actual revenue, which directly affects the pilot program, the pilot payment that we do receive at the city. So COVID definitely had effect in the number of parkers and activity that they were seeing in their garages. And the last area I just want to highlight, I think I just missed something. Oh, it was on this page all along. Real estate conveyance tax. You see, we were about $1 million ahead of budget on the revenue side for real estate conveyance tax. That is due to the great economic development that we see, and also real estate conveyance taxes tied to sales, commercial and private, and certain private sales in the city. So we continue to see sales go up in the city as well. So we're able to get about $1 million over budget on that category. Overall, we've seen a shortfall in revenue of about $8.7 million, which was actually better than we expected from the revenue earlier on in fiscal year 21. The other thing on this page is ARPA funding. So we had originally projected a deficit as high as $14 million midway through fiscal year 21. And we were going to cover that with revenue replacement. In the last presentation I mentioned, we only used about $1 million out of the 20 million that was actually approved. So you can see that number plugged in here, which helps us from the city side balance out to the positive result that you've seen in the beginning slide. So we actually only used 977,000 of the ARPA funding related to lost revenue. And the reason we do that is because ARPA funding has to be related to the provision of government services, which means keeping government going. What lost revenue did you receive to keep government going? But the caveat to that is you cannot use it to increase your fund balance. So again, you look at this and say, well, you ran 8.7, why didn't you just use ARPA to cover that 8.7 million? And again, it gets into what did you save on expenditures and did it offset your revenue loss? Because you just can't add $8 million of ARPA fund to the fund balance, if that makes sense. That's a violation of what ARPA can be used for. So I'm gonna just scroll down to the expenses really quickly and just highlight some of the expenditure savings that we've seen in the fiscal year. The next few pages that I'm scrolling through were really historical past trends of revenue. On the expenditure side, you will see that we saved $8.7 million in actual expenditures. So that was through vacancy savings, the expenditure control program that I had implemented during fiscal year 21 to stop, and only focus in on priority spending during that fiscal year. Again, those expenditure controls did not relate to public safety. So we see that one of our biggest savings is in police is $2.7 million. That is primarily through salary attrition, but that's because we know police had a high number of vacancies throughout the year, just in retirement and just not being able to fill the position. So that did offset any of the overtime overage that you would see within their line item budget. We did not end up using any of the expenditure reserve because we did receive federal money for COVID. And again, based on the results that you see here, it really just lapsed towards the bottom line to sort of offset the revenue that you've seen in the previous few pages. Some of the areas that we did see a deficit in on the expenditure side was debt service. We had budgeted a refunding of about almost $3 million. I'm gonna round it to $3 million. We did not do the refunding and savings because one of the priorities of this administration was to make sure that we only do refundings or savings that have a net present value in every year, not just on the bottom line, but in every year. We did get a few proposals, but they did not meet the criteria that we wanted to meet. So we just didn't perform a refunding or savings within that fiscal year. So that was one of the primary drivers of the debt service deficit within that year, within fiscal year 21. We did also budget about $3.1 million in savings. But again, remember, when we budget a negative savings, it's really the aggregate of every department that meets that savings number. And our Board of Education came in on budget of about $91,000 surplus. You know, with all the items that they had going into fiscal year 21, remote learning and then going back to school, there was definitely a shift in expenditures that we seen in the second half of the year when they went from remote learning back to in-person. But all in all, they were able to still run a balanced budget within fiscal year 21 by maximizing all their ESSER grants and other grants, and again, being careful during that second half of the year on in-person learning and actual expenditures. So again, this 8.7 really offsets the revenue loss that you've seen plus the ARPA fund. So that's how we get to the $9,200 surplus that you've seen in the beginning slide. The only other one I really want to highlight is our medical fund. So this is where we are purporting our fiscal year medical fund to come out during the fiscal year. We're going with about $117.4 million in expenditures, which is related to claims and all other. And you have the claims number up here, which was about 112 million. It was about $5.5 million more than the previous fiscal year. And again, that's active members and retirees in these claim numbers. And then overall expenses, again, of 117.4 million. And then when you scroll down, we had 118.3 million in actual revenue, primarily made up of two categories: outside revenue, which is this $29 million number, which is cost sharing from our city employees, and a few other special fund grants that we charge for medical, and the general fund, which is $83.9 million. Overall, you see we ran a $952,000 surplus, which enabled us to get the fund balance into a positive. But again, as we discussed and we'll discuss in later monthlies, medical is one of the unpredictable items in just public and private sector. No one can accurately predict what they're going to spend on claims. We are happy that we got it into a positive balance, but that is something we continue to watch for this fiscal year. So that's a high level summary. Again, this is really satisfying the charter and ordinance requirements to cover negative line items in each department back and forth. There was a transfer that was submitted and is in the back of this PDF for the committee to review. But Vice Chair Marchand, with that, I will answer any questions from the committee members.
Before we go to the committee members, Mr. Gormany, I just wanted to point out that the PDF copy of the pre-audit report that the committee has is 34 pages long. The title of the page of the table of contents says that page 35 through 41 is the actual transfer. And we are not in receipt of pages 35 through 41. And so if you have it handy, it might be good for you to go through it, because that's what we're actually voting on. And it was not
Oh,
included. in the
okay.
packet.
My apologies. Yes, and I will send the committee. This is the one that was posted online, so I'm not sure why
We
yours
must have been a
different, but
prior
we will-
version or something. So
Yeah,
thank you.
we will certainly get you the correct copy. Again,
We've
this
got
is
the
also
resolution. We just need to see the numbers, right? The sheet that shows where's the money coming from? Where is it going? There you go.
Right.
That page right there.
So this is the transfer that should have been, that I believe was also included in with the resolution and stuff. But we have 4 major departments that the money is coming from. Expenditure reserve, which again lapsed the balance of $4 million. Let me see if I can rotate this page for you, because
It would be easier to see. There we go. Thank you, sir.
make sure that one, okay.
This is it right here.
So we have expenditure reserve, which lapsed $4 million because we didn't use it. We have 2.5 million in actual police services. Again, that's after all the overage and overtime and anything else is accounted for. We still have $2.5 million left over in police services. Employee benefits had about $1.5 million left over. And to balance this out, we took $35,140 from contract reserve because we didn't have any contract settlements within the fiscal year of 21, and we had funding left over after any salary or other expenditures were taken out of that account. So that is really going to cover these particular departments. In fiscal year 21, finance ran over budget by about $43,000, a little over $43,000. Fire services, which we have projected a much bigger deficit during the fiscal year, only ended with a little bit over 238,000. Again, as I mentioned, vacancy savings is really, it's a budgeted savings, but it's covered by every other department. Debt service and self-insurance and commission on equal opportunity. So in essence, when you look above at the summary of the departments, you'll see that there was a negative, the departments that were negative total about $8 million. So we're using the savings from these 4 departments to cover the deficits in the other departments. Again, the rest of the paperwork is just the resolution and the fiscal impacts and everything.
Thank you, Mr. Gormany.
With that, Alderman Marchand, I will take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Gormany. We will proceed with questions from committee members, starting with, let me just see who's still with us. I know that Alder Morrison had to step away. So we will start with Alder Festa.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Appreciate it. Just clarification on the reserve fund. I thought we did use some of that money, or did we pay it back once we got the FEMA funding? Didn't we use like
So I believe
towards something, and I can't remember exactly.
So we did.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Alder Festa. We
Sorry,
did
I'm
use.
getting tired and I'm talking over you. So I will let you speak now, Mr. Gormany.
No problem. We came to the Board of Alders with a transfer for $800,000 for temporary staffing related to the health department. That was for schools and other temporary nursing services during the fiscal year that were needed. I believe I testified at that meeting that we have the transfers approved, but if we don't need them at the end of the fiscal year, we don't actually do the transfer. So the health department with lapsed salary and other savings actually had enough to cover what COVID didn't cover, because some of the expenses went into the COVID fund, some were strictly the health department. They had enough lapsed salary and overtime and other savings to actually cover it. So that's why you don't see the transfer out of expenditure reserve.
Okay, thank you for that, because I did remember everything you just said, including we may not need it, but thanks for the clarification and for letting us know that we didn't need to transfer the funds after all. And then just, I know that there's low interest rates out there. We all have bank accounts that are, our interest rates are not that great, but what is the interest rate that we are getting? Because there are certain accounts that you can get higher rates for than others, even short term, because I'm assuming that the low interest rates that you're talking about are the short-term investments or just a savings account, checking account. So we have liquid funding available to us. But can you just explain that a little bit and the interest rate?
No, yeah, I think you explained it well. With these are the short-term investment funds that we can do per the charter and per what we call short-term investment, we call STIF. So just with various general fund bank accounts, we earn interest or their short-term investments for the fiscal year that we invest those funds in and get a return on by the end of the fiscal year. To answer the second part of that question through the vice chair, I apologize, I just don't have the rates off the top of my head. What I can do is, because they vary during the fiscal year, I can ask our my treasury office to kind of give an average or overview of what the rates were during the year, because they did fluctuate at one point and they did change. So it's not like a fixed rate of like 2%, for the whole year. So I will definitely get that information through the vice chair and the chair for you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And through you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Gormany. No further questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Festa. Alder Furlow.
I need the unmute button to be in a bigger place. But thank you for the presentation, Mr. Gormany, and thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I have no question at this time.
Thank you, Alder Furlow. Alder Rodriguez.
Thank you, Vice Chair, and thank you, Director Gormany. I have no questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Rodriguez. Alder Hurt. Is he still with us? I do not see him. Alder Decker. Okay, so Alder Morrison, do you have any questions for our acting comptroller about the year-end pre-audit report?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. No, I have no questions at this time. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm now going to ask if there are any members of the public who wish to testify on this item. Members of the public may indicate they would like to testify by raising their hand using the raise hand function on Zoom, or sending me a note through the Q&A function. Anybody from the public wishing to testify on this item? Would any member of the public wish to testify on this item? And for a third time, would any member of the public wish to testify on this item? Seeing none, a motion to close the public portion would be in order.
So moved, Mr. Vice Chair.
Second.
The motion to close the public portion has been moved and seconded. Any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, let's call the roll. Alder Marchand, yes. Alder Morrison.
Yes.
Alder Festa.
Yes.
Alder Furlow.
Yes.
Alder Rodriguez.
Yes.
I see that Alder Hurt is gone. Alder Decker. All right, well, the ayes have it. The public portion is closed. And now we are ready for motions. We have 4 items before us.
Mr. Chair, I move item 1.
I second the
Second.
motion.
The item has been moved and seconded. Discussion of this item. This was the transfer, this was the title change for those positions in vital statistics. Any discussion on this motion?
Mr. Vice Chair, this is Alder Festa. It seems pretty straightforward that this is just a title change. The responsibilities remain the same, plus some that will benefit this office and hopefully improve its productivity. I support this item and encourage my colleagues to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Festa. Further discussion on item number 1.
Mr. Chair, this is Alder Jeanette Morrison. I am in support of this item. I like the fact that they're able to change titles to get even more productivity out of staff, to be able to do different things as things are changing. Staff are now in a position to be able to change with that process. And so I do support this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Morrison. Further discussion on item number 1. I would note for the record that we are already in receipt of an email from Mr. Gormany with some links that seem to give some answer to Alder Furlow's questions about state statutes and the authority of assistant registrars to perform certain functions. But we will be sure to follow up to make sure we get a full response to the questions that were submitted through the chair. Any further discussion on item number 1? Seeing none, we're going to proceed with the vote. Alder Marchand, yes. Alder Morrison.
Yes.
Alder Festa.
Yes.
Alder Furlow.
My apologies. Yes.
Alder Rodriguez.
Yes.
Alder Decker.
Yes.
Item passes.
Mr. Vice Chair, just a point of order, will we be moving 2 and 3 together?
We could do it either way. Obviously, this is a committee action. You might recall that in the budget, we move a bunch of ordinance amendments together so we can deliberate on them together. It's just that once you get to the full board, you have to vote on ordinance amendments separately. So if it's your pleasure to move items 2 and 3, I would invite you to do so.
Mr. Chair, I move items 2 and 3.
I second the motion.
Items 2 and 3 have been moved and seconded. Discussion on this motion. Alder Festa.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. We were definitely dumped with a lot of information. Talk about our brains needing some IT help and storage and clouds and all of that. We covered a lot of information. I do still have some questions. I was hoping that we would have another round, but I do have concerns with some ShotSpotter, particularly because there's certain areas that don't have it. And I'm just wondering how we can overlap maybe the radius of the coverage for ShotSpotter. I believe a lot of the infrastructure that was discussed regarding the IT department, cameras, ShotSpotter, the transfers, all of that is important for us to try and have a quality of life for all of our residents in the city, to be safe and to deter and hopefully eliminate someday any violence that is out there. We heard from the public. The testifiers were very clear about prevention of violence and how the cameras will help with that, and ShotSpotter being spot on with response from the police department, et cetera. So I am in support of these items. $12 million is a lot of money. We have also a couple of positions that we are requesting here or have been requested. And with that, we have to keep in mind that they will become general fund items moving forward, increasing our budget. But it seems like they are necessary in order for us to stay on top of the IT, the newer infrastructure that will be implemented if we all agree on it. So with that being said, I encourage my colleagues to also support these items and hopefully really deliver on some of our promises to the residents of this city. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Festa. And before I call on Alder Decker, I'll just invite you, Alder Festa, to submit to me and Madam Chair the remaining questions that you have. We can certainly see about getting them answered. And also they may be interesting to leadership and to our colleagues who chair and vice chair the Public Safety Committee. So we should make sure one way or the other that those questions get answered for sure. Alder Decker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to vote favorably on this package as well. I have to admit I came in somewhat skeptical on the two items that I raised questions about, the cameras and the shot spotter. On the cameras, I think that it's up to us to strike a balance between civil liberties and technology like cameras, which can potentially be a deterrent to crime, but I think that there's mixed evidence. That being said, the testimony of the public did move me. I mean, the folks that we heard from are real community leaders who are out there dealing with the effects of violence every day. And so their word carries the day for me. On the shot spotter, I do have to confess, I still have reservations about the technology itself. I, again, would echo the calls of Majority Leader Furlow and Deputy Majority Leader Rodriguez that we should figure out some forum to talk about the actual policy. That being said, given that my ward is not one of, for the most part, one that's directly affected by this rollout, I will certainly defer, to the folks whose wards are impacted by that. But I do have remaining questions about the technology itself. That being said, those questions aren't enough to make me not in favor of the entire package. And so I urge colleagues to support. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Decker. Further discussion on the motion before us, which is favorable recommendation on items 2 and 3. Further discussion from colleagues. Seeing none, I'll just make a couple comments myself. One is that one of the slides that was tremendously useful early in the presentation was a reminder of what we voted on so far in regards to the American Rescue Plan Act funding, $115 million in total. And the first vote that we took was for $26 million, $20 million to deal with the fiscal impact of COVID on our lost revenue and then on COVID-related expenses, and then $6 million for the summer programming that we saw happen over the summer. And if you recall, $1 million of that $20 million for the impact of COVID fiscally was used. That freed up $19 million for other uses, and 12 of that, 19, the city proposes to use for these IT and public safety investments. Now, that's not to say that's free money. We should just spend it on whatever, because that's $12 million that could go to something else. But it's $12 million that is being reallocated, not allocated for the first time. It's being reallocated because we didn't need it. Thank goodness. And so that's one thing I would note. And the second thing I would just note is that there's gonna be more discussion about the programmatic work that this technology is going to support. Already colleagues have said that there should be, a workshop at least before the Public Safety Committee, but also any relationship that the city has with outside vendors where there's contracts that need to be renewed or 4-year agreements with a technology vendor, those things get vetted by us as well. And so we should just make sure that we are vigilant in supporting our colleagues on the Public Safety Committee and the follow-up that they do, but that we as the committee, a finance committee, are vigilant in the work that we will have that will come before us. Because just because we're voting to allocate or reallocate rather $12 million of American Rescue Plan Act funds for these purposes doesn't mean that they automatically get pre-approval for 4-year contract extensions for this vendor or that vendor. They still have to come to the board for those approvals. So let's just remember that our oversight continues beyond this particular action that we're taking tonight, and that the board would take shortly thereafter. And the last thing I would say is that my particular personal view of the American Rescue Plan Act funding is that in addition to softening the blow of COVID, it should help us rebound. It should help the city recover, but do in a way that distributes resources towards those communities that have been harmed by the legacy of racism and segregation. And that's at the heart of our legislative agenda. Public safety is a part of that, right? And people in my ward at least, and I think citywide, have been asking for more support in the realm of public safety. People want and need to be safe and to feel safe. And so it's not all $115 million, it's 12 of it, maybe 10% of it, which is a meaningful chunk of that federal dollars to commit to these purposes. But I think it's appropriate, given what we've heard from our residents about the need to be safe. And that's a platform that allows us to do other work as well, to support communities that need that investment. So all of that is to say, I am supporting items 2 and 3 and I encourage colleagues to do so as well. Any further comment on items 2 and 3, the motion to give favorable recommendations to 2 and 3? Any further comment? Seeing none, I will call the roll. Alder Marchand, yes. Alder Morrison.
Yes.
Alder Festa.
Yes.
Alder Furlow.
Yes.
Alder Rodriguez.
Yes.
Alder Decker.
Yes.
The item carries. Any further motions? We have one more.
I move item 4, Mr. Vice Chair.
Second.
The item has been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the pre-audit report and the year-end transfer eliminating negative line items from last year's budget? Any discussion on that item? Seeing none, I'll call the roll. Alder Marchand, yes. Alder Morrison.
Yes.
Alder Festa.
Yes.
Alder Furlow.
Yes.
Alder Rodriguez.
Yes.
And Alder Decker.
Yes.
The ayes have it, the motion carries. A motion to adjourn is appropriate.
So moved.
Second. The motion to adjourn has been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the roll. Alder Marchand, yes. Alder Morrison.
Yes.
Alder Festa.
Yes.
Alder Furlow.
Yes.
Alder Rodriguez.
Yes.
And Alder Decker.
Yes.
The motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, all.
Alder Furlow, just real quick, when you mentioned the mute button, there was something on what was it, Shark Tank? Someone was proposing this big mute button that you could attach to your computer to unmute and unmute. You need one. We all do. Anyway.
I just found